Amsoil Signature Series. Is it the king of motor oil? Hi, I'm Lake, the Motor Oil Geek, and we're going to test out Amsoil Signature Series versus 7 other high-end oils, both foreign and domestic, boutique and name brand. Let's get started. So first up is the Redline 5W30. We've already done the 30-minute flush run, so now we're gonna fill it up for the actual test, take our 0-hour sample, and get the test started. And on the bottle, this says it's a ester-based product. So that's a group 5. We've covered that in a previous video. Okay, we got our 0-hour sample of the Redline. Go fire the dyno up. So one great thing about this dyno is that it is completely electronically controlled. Both the throttle and the load controller are on servos. That means there's no operator influence on the results. So 2 hours at 280 degrees oil temperature is a little bit tougher on the oil than you might think. That stuff went in nice and clear looking. It's awful dark now. And because the Redline is a full synthetic ester formulation, we're gonna use some Shell Rotella tea. See, you diesel guys thought that I hate on diesel oil. I don't hate on diesel oil. This is great for diesels. And guess what? That high detergent dispersant chemistry in Shell Rotella T4 is perfect for flushing out and helping to get rid of that ester out of here. I just wouldn't run it in this engine all the time because there are oils that do a better job at protecting that flat tappet cam than this does. So we're running the Rotella flush right now. We'll let this run for about 10 minutes and then drain it out, and that'll be test number 1 down. Only 7 more to go. So to tackle a project as big as this, there's only one place for me to come, and that's here at Shaver Specialty Racing Engines.
Oh my gosh, Lake, that's so cool that you could say that. You know, we've been working together now we just figured it out this morning, about almost 15 years, right around there.
Yeah.
And because of the repeatability of this dyno, it's a great tool to try to find out the information that we're finding out about what's happening with all these oils and how much wear does each one of them save.
It's really neat because this engine's pretty unique. The guys at Comp Cams designed a special flat tappet cam that is designed to wear faster than normal.
And because of that, we can get a lot of information in a fairly short period of time.
Right, so we can get test results in 2 hours versus 100 hours.
Right, exactly.
What we're gonna do is we're gonna run this engine at 20% throttle, 15% load, but every 5 minutes, we're gonna make a 3,000 to 6,000 RPM power test.
We've got to remember, we've done a lot of those power tests. We figured it out the other day, like over 7,000 dyno pulls this engine has on.
Yeah, so we've got a really good procedure, and what we're gonna start off with is a 0-hour sample. So the engine's on the dyno, ready to go, it's been flushed. After the end of the first hour, take a second sample, and then at the end of the test, 2 hours, we'll take 2 more samples. Then we can be able to do the oil analysis and draw that trend of how much wear is occurring over the course of those 2 hours. Then let's us compare how all 8 of these oils protect against wear in a flat tappet engine. Of course, we also have very special piston rings in this engine. They have different coatings. So we can really see what's going on wear-wise in this engine from the used oil analysis, and of course, the dyno gives us all kinds of great data.
The dyno information itself is very, very valuable. With all those runs that we're making, this dyno being as accurate it is, as it is, Lake, we can actually see what's happening with the curve, the horsepower and torque curves in relationship to each oil. Some of these changes are so minor, but we can actually see that in the recorded data that we have.
We're gonna find out, so we gotta shut up, start this thing up so we can show you some results. Next up, Pennzoil Ultra Platinum, made with natural gas. And it used to say made from natural gas. I'm not sure how much of a change, but that is the GTL base oil. Let's give it a go. Okay, the flush run is done and our 0 hour sample has been taken. Time to start the test with the Pennzoil Ultra Platinum 5W30. Fire in the hole. Right on time. So 2 hours later, time for the final pull on the Pennzoil Ultra Platinum. Let's see what she does. Okay, so we mentioned earlier about how the red line was a highly polar oil. We had to do all this flushing, extra stuff to remove all those additives. So we ran it for 10 minutes with Rotella. Then we ran it for 30 minutes with regular Pennzoil Ultra Platinum, flush it all out. Let me show you the very first dyno run of the day. So the green line is the first run with the Pennzoil Ultra Platinum. The blue line is the second run with the Pennzoil Ultra Platinum. And what that's showing you is that after all of that flushing, there was still enough of the red line additive still on the surfaces to affect the horsepower output on the first pull. Once that first pull was done, it had removed that last remnant of the red line additive. Then the Pennzoil could start doing its job, which is why we wait and average only the last 3 pulls from each test to report the horsepower. Just because, even though we're doing all this flushing, you saw it right there. There's a little bit of carryover. The oil was all gone, but what was left were the additives that were on the surface. And only runtime could remove those additives from the surfaces completely, which is why we're doing all this extra flushing and all that so we can get you credible, accurate results. Ravvenol DXG USVO. This is one of the oils that I've actually been really curious to test out. I've never tested Ravvenol before. I've heard of it and I've seen it at trade shows when I've gone over to Europe in the past, but never tested it. And what's neat about this oil is it uses very little viscosity index improver. That's what the USVO stands for. And on the label, it says that it's a polyalpha olefin PAO based oil. So I'm really curious to see how this oil does. Got a cool little pour spout too. Okay, 2 hours down on the Ravvenol USVO 5W30. It's actually run the coolest oil temperature of all the oils so far. So let's take a power run and see how she stacks up on power. Okay, that's the Ravvenol. Time for another flush and another oil. We're only not even halfway through yet, really, and 2 of them are already full. So time to dump some buckets. Next one up is Liqui Moly, Molygen. As we mentioned, some of these oils are ester based, some are the GTL, some of them are PAO ester blends, all these different varieties of synthetics. So we're using the Liqui Moly Group 3 formula to help kind of space out those Group 5 ester, highly polar type oils. So again, we get good, consistent results. But this one is exceptionally weird because, as you're gonna see, this green is like antifreeze green. I mean, check that out. I mean, that looks straight up like antifreeze. Of course, it's not, because the green is just a dye. Not doing the proper flushing like we're doing here is one of the main reasons that a lot of the dyno oil tests you've seen aren't valid. If you're not doing this kind of flushing between each oil, you're not getting valid results. It's a lot of hard work to get it right. You got water pressure, you got oil pressure, ignition, load, throttle, fire in the hole. Here we go, test run on Liqui Moly. So it was nice and bright and green going in the engine. Let's see what it looks like now. Because the test is only 2 hours, we're gonna send a sample of the used oil from these tests to the lab for oxidation stability testing to see how much more life is left in each oil after the 2 hours at that high temperature. That'll be a great way of knowing what kind of service life that oil could have in the real world. You know, using Rotella as our flush oil is actually a perfect example of application dictating chemistry. Our application is we need to flush out all of the oil, all the esters and friction modifiers. We got to get that chemistry out of the engine. How are we going to do it? We're going to use that detergent dispersant chemistry from this diesel oil to help wash all of that away. Like we always say, application dictates chemistry, and we're putting it to use. Got to flush out the Liqui Moly Molygen and make way for the high performance lubricants no viscosity index improver oil. And just in case you're wondering, yes, we are pre-filling every filter every time. For the flush, for the test. Time for the flush fill of the high performance lubricants no viscosity index improver oil. This one is definitely unique in the whole bunch. Where the Ravvenol had a low amount, almost none, this has none. So this will be really curious to see what it does. We do know one thing it's not gonna do. It won't shear and break down because there's no viscosity index improver to break down. And we showed that in that previous video on viscosity breakdown. This one sheared 0. Whew. That's the end of day 3, oil test number 5. 2 more days to go, 3 more oils to go. Next oil up is Mobil 1 5W30 truck and SUV formula. After the high performance lubricants, no viscosity index improver 5W30, and you're liking, why are you saying this? Well, reason why we chose this order of testing is because I know the guys at HPL use some alkylated naphthalene. And that's the reason why we chose this oil for this test, because unlike regular Mobil 1, the truck and SUV formula contains alkylated naphthalene. Yeah. We're actually here at King Industries, which is a special Group 5 base oil. We'll leave a link for that video in the description box below as well, which is why we're testing it. This is kind of cool stuff. I want to see how it does. Oil level's perfect where it's supposed to be. We'll take that sample, fire it up. We're almost to the end. Next up, Driven's LS30. I did formulate this oil, by the way. You know, and I kind of regret something. This is the old formula of LS30. Before I left Driven, we actually had worked on a newer formula, a calcium magnesium blend, more like an API SP based oil. This is the older SN, higher calcium, no magnesium formula, which is good, but that newer formula that Driven's coming out with really soon is a better formula than what we're testing today. But still, I'm curious to see how the old formula stacks up against everybody else's API-SP based products. So as part of our flush procedure, we actually pour a quart of oil through the engine before we actually begin to fill it up to do the flush run. That way we can push the oil that's in the valve covers down into the oil pan and out. It just helps remove a little bit more of the residual oil by doing that. Okay, there's our samples of the driven LS30 after 2 hours of dyno time. So this is the end of day 4 of testing, 7th oil down. Tomorrow, final day, final filter, final oil. Did we save the best for last? Let's find out.
Here it is, Lake.
We decided to pull the camshaft out of the engine. This is after 24 hours of dyno testing. So we had 8 oils this time. This is the same camshaft from the previous
test. Yes, yeah. Yes.
Which was the $5 versus $10 synthetic oils.
Correct.
So that's 12 different oils, 24 hours of race simulation durability testing on a flat tappet cam.
And it lived, Lake.
It did.
It lived.
Over half of them were API-SP rated. So if anyone ever doubted, do modern oils protect flat tappet cams? Don's holding the proof.
They do. They really do.
Last samples taken. 5 days. 8 different oils. I don't know how many dyno runs that is, but it's a lot, a ton of fuel. We'll send these off to the lab and get you some data and show you the results right now. Okay, so we're gonna break this up into 3 different areas. First, we're gonna cover the wear test results from the engine. Then we'll cover the dyno test results in terms of horsepower, temperature, those kind of things. And then lastly, because this is just a couple hour test, we're going to show you some lab results where we've done the KRL shear stability testing, as well as PDSC and TIOS. So TIOS is the turbo engine oil stability test. So these are industry standard tests that are designed to kind of show, okay, well, how would this oil work? What's it going to do in terms of, say, deposits, oxidation, life stability in the real world in a longer drain interval scenario? As we go along, we'll show some summaries of all of these, but I'm going to kind of walk through each of these one at a time. And the reality is there's so much information here. If you want a real deep dive into these results, please let me know in the comments below, because we're going to go through this pretty quick. So let's get started. First up is the red line oil. As we can see here from these results, it is an ester-based oil. Oxidation value of over 100, brand new, shows that. So full ester oil. And we can see that it has 14 parts per million tin in the new oil, and that is from the molybdenum additive. We covered that before, that some of these molybdenum additives actually contain a trace level of tin. So when you're using the RDE method, you can see that. So we subtract out the tin from the wear results on all the samples that had tin in it as new oil. As we go across the page, we can see that at the end of the 2 hour test, the total wear metals with the red line was 16 parts per million, and the oxidation value had dropped slightly. It's right there. So really no big change in oxidation, no big change in viscosity, 16 parts per million wear metals with the red line. Next up was the Pennzoil Ultra Platinum. It contains a slight amount of tin as well, not as much as the red line because there's not as much moly. It also contains a trace level of titanium. We see this all the time with the Pennzoil Ultra Platinum. So again, that's minused out of these results. And at the end of the test, Pennzoil Ultra Platinum produced 13 parts per million of wear metals. Again, no real big change in oxidation from 10 to 12. Viscosity stayed right there at 10, so it was a little bit lower in viscosity than the red line. Still within the 30 grade range, but closer to the low side versus toward the high side. Next up is the Ravvenol. This is the USVO, made in Germany. And again, we can see the oxidation level at 31.2 in the new oil. That is a traditional PAO ester blend, where there's a probably 8 to 10% ester being added as a co-base stock to provide the solvency that the PAO cannot. And we see that over the course of the test, really no big change in viscosity or oxidation value with it. Slight amount of 10 from the Moly additive in the Ravvenol, minus it out. Ravvenol produced 11 parts per million of total wear metals at the end of the 2-hour test. Then we back-to-backed it with the Liqui Moly, the other German oil. Now this one is different, we mentioned it before. It is actually a group 3 base product, and we can see that in the oxidation value being under 10, so there's no esters going on in this oil. And we can see that really no big change in viscosity, a slight drop in viscosity, a little bit of an increase in oxidation. Everything else is looking pretty good. No big change here. Again, the little bit of 10 in the oil from the Moly additive, 8 parts per million total wear metals with the Liqui Moly. So far, it's done the best in terms of wear protection of all the oils tested. The next oil up is the high performance lubricants, no viscosity index improver oil, No-VI oil. Again, PAO ester blend. I also think it contains some alkylated naphthalene. So we're right there at 30 on the oxidation level, and really it doesn't change. A tiny little bit of decrease. Error of the test method here. No change in viscosity as expected. No shearing at all with the no viscosity index improver oil. When we look down, 17 parts per million, 10 from the Moly level. It's a much higher level of Moly. We're still producing 13 parts per million of wear metals total at the end of the 2-hour test with the HPL. Jumping on to the Mobil 1 truck and SUV formula. We know that one is group 3 with maybe a little bit of PAO, but it definitely has some alkylated naphthalene in it, right? Oxidation level at 10, changes slightly up to 11.1, tiny little bit of loss of viscosity there. But if we look at the 10, a little bit of 10, again from the Moly additive, minus that out, we're at 11 parts per million total wear metals at the end of the 2-hour test with the Mobil 1 truck and SUV formula. Now on to the driven LS30, and we can see it at 39.4. Again, PAO ester blend, happen to note, is actually group 3 PAO and ester, so it kind of captures a wider range of base oils to make this oil work. And really, again, no change in viscosity, actually a slight increase in viscosity on the test, very slight change in oxidation value, no real big changes here. Again, higher level of Moly, higher level of 10 initially. At the end of the test, we're at 8 parts per million total wear metals. So the driven LS30 and the Liqui Moly have done the best so far in terms of total wear metals at the end of the 2-hour test. So I've included the results from the Napa oil from our previous test just as a frame of reference. So how good are these non-API oils? And some of them are API oils, but how good are these oils compared to the lower dollar oil? So we just brought back the Napa oil just for comparison, and we can see, again, over the course of that test, viscosity really didn't change, oxidation really didn't change. It had that same higher level of 10 initially because of the higher level of Moly. The total parts per million of wear metals with the Napa was 14. So it kind of slots in toward the top of how these oils were doing. Now, of course, did we save the best for last or not? The last oil up is the Amsoil Signature Series. And as we can see, again, it's a PAO ester blend at 58 on the oxidation level. It's much higher oxidation because there's probably a little more ester in this formulation than others. but really no change in viscosity, really no change in oxidation. And we look at the total wear metals, we're at 11 parts per million total wear metals with the Amsoil. So that's the engine wear metal test results. Now let's move on to the dyno test results. So when it came to that dyno test, really we're seeing two key things. Both oil temperature, that split between the water temperature and the oil temperature, is an important measurement of how efficient it's cooling, because that's one of the important jobs of the oil. Isn't just to lubricate, it's also to cool. So we're going to evaluate that, as well as how much torque, how much horsepower did these oils make? Can we really see a difference between them? So looking at that temperature delta information, we really kind of fall into three groups. The red line ran the hottest. It was about 100 degrees hotter on the oil than the water temperature. Now compare that to the Pennzoil Ultra Platinum, which ran next in that engine, and we see that it was only about a 90-degree split between the water temperature and the oil temperature. And that's probably really down to the base oil viscosity. We saw that the red line was at the higher end of that 30 grade range, where the Pennzoil Ultra Platinum was towards the lower side of the 30 grade range. And that difference in base oil viscosity, when you're running at a constant speed and a constant load, that thicker oil generates more heat. So, like I said before, sometimes going up in viscosity can be beneficial, but not always. There's a trade-off, there's a price to pay for anything you do when it comes to lubricants and chemicals. It's just the way it is. I know that's not always the funnest news to get, but it is the truth. And when we looked at the rest of the oils, most of them fell into that high 80s range, somewhere around 88, 89, 87, somewhere around there is where most of them came in. The two outliers towards the end were the Driven LS30 and the Amsoil Signature Series. The coolest running oil of the whole bunch was Driven's LS30. Now, I happen to know the reason for that. The base oil viscosity, how that oil is built, was made to run cooler. It's a high performance oil, which was designed for high performance engines in order to be run on a track where oil temperature matters. So it's not surprising to me that the LS30 did the best in this regard, because that's what it was made to do. And as you'll see, it doesn't mean that it was the best at everything, but it's really good at what it was designed to do, because application always dictates chemistry, and all of these results are a great example of that. And when we look at the dyno graphs, it becomes pretty apparent that that higher base oil viscosity, whatever it is in the red line, it was the worst in terms of peak torque, peak power, just area under the curve in general. The best oils in terms of that area under the curve were both the Liqui Moly, Molygen, and the Driven LS30. So those two oils did the best in terms of area under the curve. And you may say, why are you saying this area under the curve? Doesn't peak numbers, like, no, peak numbers don't mean anything. What you want to see is area under the curve. The highest and the broadest the torque curve, the faster the engine will be down the track. That's going to give you more acceleration. It's not about a peak number, it's about the area under the curve, especially torque is what moves things. Horsepower is a calculation. So as a dyno person, I'm looking at that torque curve and I'm saying, okay, clear differences here. What you can see is about a 10 foot-pound difference between the best and the worst. So pretty significant difference there. You could feel that in the seat of your pants if you poured in 10 more foot-pounds of torque into your engine. So that's the dyno results. Now, let's go beyond just that 2-hour test, that performance measurement, and let's go see what would happen with shear stability, oxidation stability, and turbo engine deposits. So with these PDSC results, again, oxidation stability, the higher the number, the better. That means longer oil life, better temperature stability. And there's a clear winner here. The high performance lubricants product just dominates on this test with a 117 minute performance. Next up is the Amsoil Signature Series. It's getting on the podium there at 88 minutes on the PDSC results. And then really it's a pretty tight tuck. You basically almost tied for third place between the Mobil 1 Truck and SUV formula and the Pennzoil Ultra Platinum. They're both right at 68, 69 minutes. So those are your top three in terms of oxidation stability. The worst performer in this bunch is the Driven LS30. Again, not surprising to me because I know the chemistry in that formula was optimized for high performance. This isn't an oil that was designed for people who were trying to do extended drain intervals. These are for people who are tracking their cars, or it's high performance street cars, where they're going to be changing the oil every 3,000 miles or maybe sooner than that. So these results really aren't surprising. They kind of stack up with what each of these oils is intended to do. Moving on to the next one, which is shear stability. So that's that KRL test. We're looking at how stable is the viscosity of the oil. Is it going to break down under high temperature, high shear? We didn't really see much change on the dyno, but that engine isn't very severe when it comes to mechanical shearing. It has very smooth cylinder bore finish. It has low tension piston rings. There's not a lot in this engine to chew up and kill the oil in a 2-hour test. So the KRL is going to give us more of an indication of what's going to happen in the real world. And opposite of the PDSC test, here you want a low number. The lower the better. So in this case, again, there's two clear winners. The high performance lubricants, no viscosity index improver oil, basically had almost zero shear. The only thing shearing in there are probably some of the dispersant molecules. They're pretty long chain that they could shear a little bit. The next one is the LS30. Again, built with shear stable protection. Not surprising, those two oils, one with viscosity index improver, but very shear stable, and the one without viscosity index improver did the best in the test. Third place, quite surprisingly, was the Pennzoil Ultra Platinum. It actually outperformed the Ravvenol USVO, which I thought would be in the top three because it has a low amount of viscosity index improver. But in this case, it got beat out a little bit by the Pennzoil Ultra Platinum. So Ultra Platinum's doing a pretty good job. It's pretty solid all-around performer here so far, which kind of matches what I've seen in the results from using it in the Wombat. So the last set of test results is the TEOST, Turbo Engine Oil Stability Test. This is designed to simulate what happens when you turn off your turbocharged engine. Because you may have thought that, oh, wide open throttle and all that temperature, that's what's going to really kill the oil. And it does put heat into the oil. But the worst thing for the oil is when you turn the engine off. And now that oil that's in that turbo isn't flowing anymore. So where it can be cooling, it's now baking. And if you get deposits building up on those turbo bearings, your turbo is not long for this world. So for turbocharged engines, this test is a bench test that can kind of predict what's going on in that engine in terms of deposit buildup. So again, in this case, the lower the number, the better. You don't want a high level of deposit when it comes to your TEOST. And there were 3 clear winners in this test that were quite a bit better than everybody else. The top 2 oils in the TEOST test were both the German oils. So Liqui Moly, Molygen, and the Ravvenol USVO did really well in this test, almost the same. So we almost tie them for first place, and then the Amsoil Signature Series came in next. So that's your podium, Liqui Moly, Ravvenol, and Amsoil when it comes to turbo engine deposit test. And just an honorable mention in 4th place happens to be the Pennzoil Ultra Platinum. The interesting thing about these results is that when you look at all of them, some oils did really well in certain tests. but not so well. Like, for example, the Liqui Moly did great with the turbo engine stability test, but it was the worst when it came to shear stability. Well, we know that the driven LS30 did really good in shear stability, not so great when it came to deposits. So there's a trade-off, and we mentioned that earlier, that when it comes to engine oils, there isn't a one best oil. All of these oils have different characteristics, and depending upon what your application is, one of the chemistries here might be better for you. So I hope you really enjoyed seeing all of these results and understanding that, yes, application does indeed dictate chemistry, and there isn't one oil that's just better than all of them. It's about finding the right oil that matches the needs of your application. That's what provides the best performance, best lubrication. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. Check out one of these. Until we see you next time.